Safety concerns at a local business after a child is injured in a long fall. Good evening and thank you for joining us. There's controversy surrounding the local Boulder Bear Climbing Center after an 8-year-old girl fell and severely injured herself at the gym's summer camp. The girl's mother is now left questioning the safety measures at the facility and is filing a lawsuit. Joel Mendelson joins us in studio with more on the story. Joel.
Thank you, Ryan. Much of the controversy here lies with the climbing center's response after the incident. The girl reportedly fell from a height of around 20 feet or 7 meters, yet there was no call made for an ambulance.
I said to him, "Oh, she fell, like that's a far fall, is it not?" And he's like, "Well, it's not a short one."
Lexi Lettinen is the girl's mother. Her Facebook post about 8-year-old Natalia has gone viral around the city. Lettinen says she received a non-urgent sounding call last Friday informing her that Natalia had fallen and hurt her wrist. When she arrived at the gym, she says her daughter was barely awake with a clearly broken wrist, blood on her face and clothing, and suffering chest pains. Lettinen says the hospital staff were surprised that she wasn't brought in an ambulance.
They started doing like chest scans and things like that and realized that she had some serious internal injuries as well as like a broken wrist, a fractured elbow. She has a severe concussion. I started to ask the questions to the owner, like, why was EMS not called there? And he said to me that the doctors can say whatever they want. He was a police officer for 15 years. He assessed her himself. He determined she didn't have serious injuries, that her ribs weren't broken. He thought she was fine.
TBT News reached out to Boulder Bear's owner, but he was not available for an interview. However, a post on the business's Facebook states everyone at the gym is heartbroken for the child, and they refute any suggestion that the staff didn't do their absolute best to care for Natalia. Apparently, none of the staff members actually witnessed the girl's fall. At the hospital, it was confirmed that she sustained a partially collapsed lung in addition to her other injuries. Fortunately, Natalia's condition has been improving over the last week.
She's better, obviously, every day. She struggled. She was on oxygen and narcotics for a couple of days. She was discharged earlier this week, and she's just kind of getting over the concussion symptoms the most and just general pain from the whiplash of falling from that height.
Lettinen says the whole situation was severely mishandled, and she's retained a lawyer in order to file a lawsuit against Boulder Bear. Joel Mendelson, TBT News.
All right, let's turn to the extreme heat now. Cooling centers around the city have been struggling to keep up with an increased demand during this heat wave. Elevate NWO has seen more than 100 people a day come through its doors on Cumberland Street to escape the dangerous conditions. Vasilios Bellows joins us live from outside Elevate's cooling center. Vasilios, what challenges has the heat brought to the local homeless population?
Yeah, Ryan, people often think of the struggles that come with living outdoors in the winter, but severe heat warnings can be just as dangerous and life-threatening. Heat exhaustion and dehydration are just a couple of the many health concerns for the people living outdoors this past week. A local outreach group is doing what it can to help the city's most vulnerable escape the heat.
Making sure people have hydration, hooking people up with things like hats and sunscreen.
It's been no easy task for Elevate NWO's cooling center during the recent heat warning, with about 115 individuals coming through its doors on and off each day. The center offers a place for people to get some water, a good meal, and cool off, crucial as Humidex values over the past week have neared 40. Executive Director Holly Govan says their services are in high demand right now, as there's so few places in the city to cool off that don't cost money.
A lot of people in here with heat exhaustion, a lot of people who are on medications that don't interact well with the sun, and so these can cause some really serious complications. And so we're working closely with EMS, our medical team here responding to people as needed, and yeah, it's just a lot of pressure is on right now.
Encampments have been popping up across the city this summer, and while there are a number of cooling centers in Thunder Bay, Elevate is the only one on the north side. The organization has been sending outreach workers to many of these locations over the past week to ensure those living in encampments are staying safe.
We encourage people to go to their nearest center. We make sure they know where those centers are. Sometimes our staff will even drive people. There's a lot of assessment work that goes in with each person. A lot of times our nursing staff will go out if the outreach workers have identified an issue or concern related to health. So our nursing staff will jump on the outreach van and assess the situation.
Gauvin goes on to mention that even with conditions expected to cool down over the next few days, Elevate's work will continue as the number of homeless people in Thunder Bay continues to rise. Back to you in the studio, Ryan.
Okay, thank you very much, Vasilios. Northwest Region OPP continue to catch drivers traveling way over the posted speed limit on area highways. 2 people were charged with stunt driving over the past week. The first incident was on the afternoon of July 26th. Atikokan OPP conducted a traffic stop on Highway 11 after the driver was clocked doing 148 kilometers an hour in a 90K zone. The 25-year-old male driver from Thunder Bay was charged with stunt driving and having cannabis readily available in the vehicle. And on Monday evening, a minivan passing through Terrace Bay was tracked at 125 kilometers per hour in a 60K zone. The 41-year-old male driver from Alberta was charged with stunt driving. The offense comes with a 14-day vehicle impoundment and a 30-day driving suspension. Scriber Mayor Kevin Mullins has declared a state of emergency regarding the township's wastewater treatment plant. Officials say a structural failure that allowed water to enter the digester is preventing proper wastewater treatment. The plant has 2 clarifiers, but one of them experienced a structural failure, and now the other has seen a mechanical failure. The contractor is on site, and once the area is drained and cleaned, the repairs can begin. Officials say the state of emergency is just a precautionary measure and that the issue won't affect residents or businesses' daily water usage or the sewer system. North Star Air presented its largest ever revenue sharing check this week to Edmonton First Nation. The $1 million has accumulated over the past 3 years. As Justin Hardy tells us, the community is now looking for investment opportunities.
Edmonton First Nation had cause for celebration this week as North Star Air presented Chief and Council with a $1 million check. The money comes from North Star Air's revenue sharing agreements with the 11 First Nations it partners with. The agreements see the company returning some of the revenue generated through flights to and from each reserve back into the community. Edmonton has received over $2.5 million through the agreement so far, but this most recent payment was the first to hit $1 million. North Star Air President and COO Jeff Stout says each First Nation receives varying amounts and can use the funds as they see fit.
These funds, they go a long ways. Every community treats the funds differently, but there's been examples of building housing, supporting youth-based activities, land-based activities. Not sure what Fort Hope has planned for it yet, but ultimately these funds empower social and economic growth in the community that they otherwise wouldn't potentially have access funds to.
Edmonton's Chief and Council announced that they would be looking into potential investment opportunities to put the funds toward. Chief Saul Etlikin said he had a feeling the agreement would be beneficial for the community.
I thought anyways that wasn't in council when that happened, that if we stick with the airlines through the ups and downs, one day it's going to be beneficial, and we're coming together to support the airline as much as we can from our community. So it has paid off.
In addition to revenue sharing agreements, North Star Air's community partnerships also see the company working with each community to create new business opportunities and employment, as well as an education grant for community members who are studying aviation anywhere in Canada. Stout says the company really appreciates the communities and the partnerships they have formed.
They're amazing, and we're a lot of gratitude on the North Star side to have a partnership like this. It enables us to do what we love to do every day, which is fly, and it's the least that we can do to show our gratitude to the community.
Since North Star Air's inception in 2014, the company has given back over $10 million to their partner communities. Justin Hardy, TBT News.
Thunder Bay Police are warning about a new scam targeting local businesses. They say they've received several reports of someone calling a business claiming to be from another business and providing a fake credit card number to make purchases. Officers are urging businesses to follow proper procedures when taking credit card information over the phone. More information about a number of prevalent scams can be found on the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre website. After a decade of sweet treats and memories, the Sweet North Bakery location on Court Street has officially closed its doors. The news comes after the store flooded in early July, and Sweet North opened a new location on High Street. Both the High Street and Fort William Road locations will remain open, but after a long pandemic, a changing economy, and the major Court Street reconstruction in 2023, the flood was the final straw for the original Sweet North location. Over the past decade, it's been a second home for co-owners Aaron and Chris De Lorenzi and their family, so making the decision to say goodbye wasn't easy.
After 10 years, I think we just kind of took a moment and we thought it through, and we thought, we're tired. And as much as we've loved it, I did not want to get emotional. As much as, it's been very meaningful to us as a family, personally, professionally, to be part of the community and part of memories that have been created here, sharing our recipes from our home and our families, and having people enjoy them and create their own memories together. It's priceless.
De Lorenzi says they're excited to focus on the High Street and Fort William Road locations and plan to increase the hours on High Street come the fall. To celebrate the end of an era on Court Street, they're having a yard sale on August 9th with some treats and coffee for the community to enjoy. A young First Nations woman is back home in Thunder Bay after competing in the Miss Indigenous Canada pageant last weekend in Southern Ontario. Jada Gregg didn't win the title, but she did bring home the Academic Achievement Award for an essay that she prepared. Gregg is Ojibwe and a proud member of the Lac Seul First Nation. Her essay spoke of her current and future education and career goals. The registered nurse works at First Nations Alliance Tribal Council and with Tikanagan. She's also on the Hear Us Youth Board, which acts as a voice for the youth in care. She says her entire career is built around working with Indigenous young people. She hopes to be able to lift her community and bring back some of what she's learned.
I learned to just put yourself out there, and even though you might not know what the outcomes are, just to try and just to believe in yourself and just to be confident in what you do. And I really want to bring that back to the youth in my community and the youth across Canada, because it's super important to just believe in yourself and be confident.
Gregg says that she hasn't even started to consider if she'll enter more pageants, but she is open to the idea, especially after walking away from this one with 25 new friends. And a lifetime of memories, to be sure. All right, let's get back to the weather now, Fiona. And we saw Vasilios there outside the cooling center for Elevate NWO. Really no surprise that they're struggling to keep up with the demand as this heat wave continues.
Yes, the temperatures didn't really fall much today at all. We maybe were about a degree cooler in actual temperature, but when you factor in the Humidex, it was still hitting 33. So yes, it was cooler, but not much, and almost unmeasurable. That was under a whole lot of sunshine. The one positive thing that might have helped some folks out there is the fact that the winds were from the northwest, 11 to 36 kilometers an hour, and that was a drier air, which is why the Humidex levels were a little lower than yesterday. It's that relative humidity that makes all the difference. Now, Fort Frances is dealing with a pop-up shower at this time, but elsewhere, lots of sunshine across the board, and temperatures very consistent. 26, 27 seems to be the average for most of the region, even in the fort where they are dealing with that rain. The Humidex, not so much of a factor today. Humidex is making it feel anywhere from 1 to 3 degrees warmer than these numbers would suggest. It isn't until you hit areas further east. Marathon still dealing with 30 Celsius at this hour. Nipigon 28. That's because the wind isn't coming off the lake, it's coming from the north. And although Wawa is a little cooler at 22, Sault Ste. Marie at 27 is experiencing high Humidex levels in the high 30s, topped out at 37. At this hour, it's sitting probably a little closer to 35 under partly sunny skies. Here in the city of Thunder Bay, we are going to drop down to a low of 15 tonight. Skies will be pretty clear, and although the winds will be a little bit gusty to start, up to 40 kilometers per hour from the northwest, it is going to taper off overnight. And as we head into the weekend, well, the temperatures are going to cool slightly. We are going to be back in more seasonal values in the mid-20s. Now, there is a slight risk of showers for Saturday, but, you know, much of this week, there were many days where we had slight risk of showers and really nothing of note happened. So it's just a slight risk. But the good news is the Humidex levels will continue to fall, making everything much more comfortable, especially heading into the long weekend. I know folks are kind of getting tired of sweating. I think I am too. So this is going to be nice. It's just going to be a beautiful weekend, a beautiful long weekend for a lot of folks.
And that is good news for everybody. Thanks a lot, Fiona. All right, when we return, we're going to turn our attention to the West Coast and a possibly dangerous situation developing in BC after debris from a landslide has dammed a major river, and there are concerns that flooding could come next. We'll have details on that and more when your Friday News Hour continues right after the break.
The entire flood releases and all that water comes crashing down that valley and down that river and into the Fraser. It could be catastrophic on a number of different fronts.
A potentially dangerous situation developing in the BC interior. Officials are monitoring a massive landslide that's dammed the Chilcotin River. There's concern that it could cause major flooding. CTV's Heather Wright brings us the story.
The chief of the Williams Lake First Nation says the lake created by this landslide has essentially doubled in the last few days, and officials now predict that this dam could break in the next 24 to 48 hours. The landslide is massive, stretching roughly 30 meters high and 600 meters long, or about the length of 6 football fields.
The sheer magnitude of that landslide is pretty breathtaking.
The chief of the Williams Lake First Nation is among those who live in the area that are closely watching what happens over the next few days. As fears grow, the buildup of so much water could soon force the dam to burst.
The entire plug releases and all that water comes crashing down that valley and down that river and into the Fraser. It could be catastrophic on a number of different fronts.
Flood warnings and watches have been issued for the area, with about a dozen people already evacuated from their homes. The landslide is located near Farwell Canyon, roughly 285 kilometers north of Vancouver. The concern is if the dam breaks, the water will gush down the Chilcotin River and into the Fraser River, sending millions of cubic meters of water rushing south, threatening communities all the way down to Hope.
17 million cubic meters of water have built up on one side of that slide, and it continues to increase by the minute, by the hour.
Along the banks of the Chilcotin, the impacts of extreme weather, including forest fires, are visible. But experts say climate change is not the only culprit, and say logging has taken away nature's best defense against landslides.
When you remove the forest and the forests are not there to actually relieve the soil water from the pressure, that's when the soil cave in, and it has been caving in since the late 90s.
Officials say it is still possible the water tops the dam and goes downstream more as a trickle, but at this point they are preparing for the worst and have recovery plans in motion in the event of flash flooding.
That was CTV's Heather Wright. Moving to this province, a neighborhood in Stratford, Ontario is shaken after an overnight shooting left 2 people dead and 2 others critically injured. Police responded to calls of gunshots late last night and found 4 people suffering from gunshot wounds. 1 person was pronounced dead at the scene, the other died in hospital.
We all were quite shaken because this is a very quiet street. I'm not too sure like what actually happened, but there was a lot of screaming and 5 or 6 gunshots.
Stratford police are now asking area residents for any video surveillance that they may have. It was another bad day on the markets. Investors, spooked by negative economic data in the United States, accelerated their sell-off. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver has the latest on the day in the red.
For the second day in a row, global markets are tumbling, with investors on Wall Street and Bay Street selling stocks over fears the U.S. economy is slowing.
It's, an understandable pullback. We just had a terrible jobs number, one of the worst jobs numbers we've seen in a long time.
The weaker than expected data that spooked investors also showed unemployment on the rise. It led to a more than 2% drop of the Dow, NASDAQ, and TSX.
It was a very Goldilocks scenario. So unfortunately, anything from there is probably down. And we didn't have the big down, so we're probably not going to have a big up.
The area hit hardest in the sell-off, the tech sector, with stocks including Amazon and Tesla down more than 20% from recent highs.
A big high flyer. And I think there's a concern that maybe that just got a bit overdone. So it's not just the slowing economy. It's perhaps a second guessing of how much exuberance there was.
While some economists fear a U.S. recession may be near, in part because the Federal Reserve has been slow to cut interest rates, U.S. officials today said the economy shows no indication of that happening.
When you look at the overall trends, yes, it's still a very strong economy that has defied all expectation in terms of its recovery and now in terms of its level of sustained, steady growth.
So what advice do economists have for Canadians worried about their portfolios?
That's the roller coaster. That's the nature of investing in something that's uncertain. You're going to get those ups and downs. Right now, it's just a down period, but ride it out, and there's money to be had on the other side.
While the U.S. Federal Reserve hasn't started cutting rates just yet, Canada's central bank has now cut twice, with Governor Tiff Macklem saying the two economies are different. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
To the latest now on the big international story from yesterday, 3 U.S. citizens are now back on American soil after the biggest prisoner swap between the U.S. and Russia since the Cold War. That's Canadian-born Paul Whelan being greeted by U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris after landing at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland just before midnight last night. Journalist Evan Gershkovich and Russian-American journalist Alsu Kirmasheva were also on the plane. The deal moved 24 people from 7 countries. 10 people were returned to Russia. Whelan was detained for more than 5.5 years. He was accused of spying, but has always maintained his innocence. This morning, the Ottawa native described the journey home.
It didn't feel real until we were flying over England. I'm a British citizen, Irish citizen, Canadian, and American. So as we came over England and I looked down, that's when it became real. We flew over Ireland, then Canada, and into America, and then I knew I was home.
Whelan's family gave special thanks to Canadian officials who pressed for his release. Kamala Harris has secured enough votes from party delegates to become the U.S. Democratic nominee. The Democratic National Convention or Committee chair has confirmed that Harris has officially received the necessary amount of votes to become the party's presidential nominee. She's the first woman of color at the top of a major party ticket. The nomination took place via virtual vote. Disgraced fashion tycoon Peter Nygard was supposed to be sentenced in a Toronto courtroom today, but that's now been pushed back to next month. Nygard was found guilty last November on 4 counts of sexual assault dating from the 1980s through the mid-2000s. CTV's Janice Golding has the details.
Peter Nygard's fate is still up in the air after his sentencing hearing was postponed until next month. The 83-year-old appeared via Zoom in virtual court. The disgraced fashion mogul could be seen lying in his hospital bed at the Toronto South Detention Centre, covered in blankets and clad in an orange prison jumpsuit with a visor obscuring most of his face as lawyers discussed an adjournment. Court heard that Crown Attorney Neville Gowalla was out of the country and could not be present and had therefore requested the adjournment to find a date when all counsel would be available. Justice Robert Goldstein agreed to an adjournment until September 9th, but added, "It will happen. It will be in person. Nygard will be there in person." Nygard was convicted by a jury last November of 4 counts of sexual assault, namely of attacking 3 women and a 16-year-old girl at his former Toronto headquarters between the 1980s and 2005. A Crown attorney had described Nygard's behavior as predatory, saying he'd used his wealth, his privilege, his resources, and his reputation to his advantage. The octogenarian was acquitted of a 5th count of sex assault as well as one of forcible confinement. The founder of Nygard International is also facing charges in Montreal and Winnipeg, as well as New York. Janice Golding, CTV News.
To Alberta now, where jury deliberations in the Coutts blockade murder conspiracy case continued for a 3rd day. The 5-man, 7-woman jury will decide the fate of 2 men accused of plotting to kill police during the Coutts border blockade. Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert are charged with conspiring to commit murder, mischief, and weapons offenses. Olenek also faces a pipe bomb charge. The pair were arrested in February of 2022 following a police raid that uncovered a cache of guns, ammunition, and body armor. Well, to a much happier story now, a BC man has found a new route to Mexico. He wanted to see how far he could get, not by car or by plane, but by public transit. As CTV's St. Alexander reports, he made it all the way to Tijuana.
Point A was Metro Vancouver's waterfront station. Point B, wherever change, tickets, tokens, and transfers could take him. In late June, William Huey was determined to see how far he could travel using only public transit.
For people who